playing for you from the new Grand Terrace on Chicago's great.
Evening, Chris.
Get ready now for 30 minutes of Super Jive in the Father Hines style. Yeah.
Hey, Martin.
What could this
Hey,
be?
Timothy, Lorena, Aaron, and Mary in Nashville. Everything kind of comes 5 at a time right now. Hey, Jordana. Hey, Mary. Hey, David and Amy. Lorena. Hey, Isabel. Hey, Terry. Hey, Eric. Hey, Benito. No, not you, Siri. Hey, Andrea. Hey, Sandy. Hey, Mona. Teresa. Hey, Christine. Hey, Debbie. Hey, Candace. Hey, Jill, Heidi, Becky, Kathy, Kelly. Thanks. Yeah, I got my ears lowered for the first time in over a year. Hey, Thomas. I'm all too familiar with the Happy Meal run. Jordana, yes, I did see that. Hey, Dina. Hey, Susan. Hey, Chuck. No, you know, I got Haunted Mansion and Muppets and Gonzo stuff on my desk at all times. So, hey, Kiara. Hey, Carrie. Hey, Jay. Hey, Beth. Hey, Amy. Hey, Casey. Well, Mary, it's not supposed to be me. I'm definitely not Megan. But, hey, Jean. Hey, Ellen. Hey, Chuck. Hey, Joanne. I'm missing people now. Hey, Diane. Hey, Lisa. Hey, Alexandra. Hey, Randall. Hey, Lee. Welcome along, everybody. Hey, Karina and Randall, Alexandra. This is all coming out of order today. Playing some different music tonight. This is Earl Hines and his band, live at a place that we're going to be talking about tonight. Hey, Leslie. I thought I'd play something from Bronzeville tonight. Hey, April. Hey, Emily. Hey, Dottie. Hey, Gina. Gina, there was a club called Club DeLisa in Bronzeville once upon a time.
Yeah, Earl Father Hines carries on now.
It didn't end up making the cut for this particular edition of the tour, but some of the others. Mary, yeah, I'm drinking some of the Jepson's bourbon that was in a sherry cask. Very delicious. Hey, Vanya, Jennifer, Dina, Deanna. Hey, Toby. Hey, Mary. And Jordan. Hey, Phyllis. Welcome along, everybody. Hey, Miguel. So, hey, Ronald in Ventura, California, over on YouTube. Hey, Barbara and Kara. Gina, that's awesome. If I'd known you were going to be here, I would have included it on the tour. I went with one of the other similar clubs instead. Mona, pretty early. I don't know yet for sure. Depends on what time I wake up. Hey, Lori. Hey, Alex. Hey, Jane. Hey, Megler. Hey, Lynn, Diane, and Trish in Wisconsin. Yeah, using different, thought I'd use something recorded in a place that we're talking about tonight. Hey, Larry. Hey, Bart. So this is live at the Grand Terrace, better known as the Sunset. No, I think it was the Grand Terrace quite a lot longer. Hey, Kelly. Hey, Luann. Hey, Cheryl. Hey, Diane in Alabama. Hey, Casey. Well, you know, we gotta shake things up a little bit here. The numbers are going down, and I can't bring in Cousin Oliver or anything, you know. Hey, Laura. And hey, Ava. Hey, Sharon, Patty, Susan, Karen, Lana, hey, Marie. Hey, Audrey. Hey, Lisa, hope you like it. I realized I could have done this like 5 different versions of this tour. There's just so much to cover out there. So many things I'm just kind of glossing over because there's only so much time. Hey Sue, hey Sandy, hey Linda, hey Jay, hey Patty. Well, you know, something I noticed when I was a Lyft driver was every time I brought someone to Bronzeville, it was an artist. So I definitely had people tell me, like, yeah, we're probably the first line. You know, Bronzeville's going to explode one of these years. And unfortunately, I'm afraid it's going to get really gentrified. Oh, Gina, that's awesome. Thanks. Hey, Kiefer over on Twitch. Hey, June. Hey, Karen. Hey, Laura. Now, there's a fine line between gentrification and revitalization, you know? Let's do a Miles tour. Yeah, here's the chair. Here's the other chair. Well, here's Miles. Miles, here. Want to chase something? There we go. And if we really want to get him. Have him chase the red dot a little bit. Hey Gladys, hey Tom, hey Teresa on Twitch. Hey Diane. Hey Crit. Lynn, no, I've not heard about the mini pig in Morton Grove. Hey Kendra. Hey, Kristen. Hey, Mom. Hey, Bridget. Carol. Evening, everybody. John, there's more than I can fit into a tour. So this is going to be like part 1 at the most, at the least. But I hope there'll be some stuff that's new for everybody here. The Mysterious Chicago Mobile, I like it. The hybrid mystery machine. I got Miles really mad right now with the red light. Hi, welcome Victoria. Hey Jennifer. Hey Amy. Miles isn't chasing it much, but he's sitting there growling at it with the red light. Kind of wore him out chasing stuff before the tour. Amy, no, I've never really covered the Lipstick Killer on tours. I've had to write about him a couple of times. It's usually a little on my too soon side. Hey, Tony. Hey, Patty. Hey, Yvette. Miles, it's okay. Hey, come see the people. It's Miles Morales, everybody. Come on. Thanks, Patty. The first time the back of my head has looked okay in a long time. Hey, Jenny. Hey, Robin. Hey, Joanne. Susan, I didn't hear about it, but I'm not surprised. And Miles is aching for the red light again. He's trying to climb on up. Here we go. Gonna get him, Miles?
A bit of jive under the general heading of "So Help Me."
You got it. Well, Miles hasn't had me out of town in a while. When he was a little guy, I had to go quite a bit when I was traveling a lot more. See if he even notices that I'm gone for a day and a half. Hey, Ian. Hey, Bridget. Donna. Hey, Mary. Yes, Keith, this is Earl Hines live at the Grand Terrace Cafe, which will be appearing tonight. Yeah, sorry, when I turn away, I got Miles hassling me over on the other side. I will give it a couple more minutes. There's not as obvious a place to stop. I'm used to exactly when to stop the music on our usual one. But people tend to pop on right exactly at 8 o'clock, so I always give it a couple of extra minutes. Hey, Kathy. Hey, Keith. Hey, Gail. Hey, Lindsay. Glad you made it, Cindy. I found some great Earl Hines stuff today, actually. Miles. Drop this toy down here. We'll start. I got a stash of cat toys in case I have to toss them out. Hey, Napor. Hey, Marilyn and Emily over on YouTube. Hey, Grandma Bell. Alright, we'll give it another minute or so. Dad, that is correct. Father Hines. He was playing jazz before it was even called jazz. Hey, Karen. Hey, Ryan. Miles. Okay, we're going to have to chase you off. Actually, okay, here. Look. There you go. Hey, John. Hey, Ann. Hey, Danielle in Edgewater. Eleanor, congrats. Hey, Sunshine. Nicole over on YouTube. I'll give it another minute or so until maybe this song ends. With the one we normally play, I know exactly where to stop it. This sounds like it's wrapping up.
Well, we're about halfway through this jive concert by Earl Father Hines and his orchestra, so now it can be told it's reaching you from the new Grand Terrace on Chicago's south side, where the couples are gaily dancing here in the cool atmosphere.
I like that announcer. Dancing here on the Chicago's south side. All right, welcome along, everybody, from both Miles and myself. I'm Adam Seltzer from Mysterious Chicago Tours. I've been a tour guide and historian here in Chicago for a good 15 years now. I've been saying that all year, so I should really switch it to 16. I've been also written a number of books on the subject, including Mysterious Chicago, the book, Flickering Empire, How Chicago Invented the U.S. Film Industry, H.H. Holmes, The True History of the White City Devil, and The Smart Aleck's Guide to American History. I'm also on the History Channel, Travel, Smithsonian all the time, so I am incredibly famous. You should definitely pay attention to whatever I say. That's what I always say anyway. So, welcome along once again. Tonight we are doing a brand new one called Bronzeville Tales. About a year ago, I had to switch to doing virtual tours like everybody else. We're going to start tiptoeing back into in-person pretty soon. Just kind of waiting for some paperwork to go through. But Bronzeville is a neighborhood just a little ways south of Chicago's Loop area. I'm going to show you a couple of maps here. First of all, let's see. So here's the Loop in Chicago. We'll go south about 20 odd blocks or so. But exactly which portion of this really makes up Bronzeville depends a little bit on who you ask. It's one of those things where there's no real standard agreed upon definitions. I'll try to circle some of it here. Move in a little. Starting at about the 31st Street area, some say it stops there at Pershing, others extend it all the way down into the 50s. So about 20 blocks south or so. So roughly thereabouts, but again, depends a lot on who you ask. It varies quite a bit. But we're going to start all the way back into its history before when it was just one guy's estate. We're going to move into the era when it was a more Jewish neighborhood. We're going to move into the time when it was the Black Metropolis, and a little bit into the future as well. So there's a whole lot of stories in this place. I ended up with a huge long list to pick from, and there's still more of them to find. More just digging around in the newspaper archives was still turning up more and more stuff all the time. So this is probably Bronzeville Tales Part 1. But we'll start going well back into history. Here we are on the bridge over Lakeshore Drive at 35th. And if we spin around here, we'll see just a little bit of the Douglas Monument. But once upon a time, this whole area was owned by Stephen Douglas, the senator. He's probably best known nowadays for being Lincoln's debate partner, ran against Lincoln in 1864. I don't have a lot of really good things to say about this guy. This was the guy who ended the Missouri Compromise, or the Missouri Capitulation, however you want to call it, who decided we could start expanding slavery into new states as long as they voted on it. This made him very unpopular even in Chicago. There was a whole riot when he tried to plug this over at the Market Hall. It's a great Tribune article that everybody who went there got away with another man's hat. But he died shortly after the Civil War broke out, and he did have kind of like a Darth Vader moment where he stopped running for president and started to focus more on just trying to save the Union. Got behind Lincoln, and we got to give him credit for that anyway. But the monument here is part of a little park that's never really open when it's supposed to be. I'm missing a picture here. It's supposed to be open Monday through Friday, 9 to 5, according to the sign. I think it's really like 10 to 4, just Friday through Sunday. There's a picture here someplace. Yeah, there's always the truck parked here with pentagrams all over it, and the license plate says Camp Blood. But if you do happen to go there on a day when it's open, I was last there like 15 years ago when it was open. But on the inside, you can walk right into the tomb, and right there on the sarcophagus, they've got brochures about him. It's the tackiest thing ever, and I love it. I am assuming the bust of him there is sculpted by Leonard Volk, who designed most of the monument. He did also do Douglas's death mask, which is really creepy looking. But this right in the grounds that was his estate was willed to the city, primarily to make a college there. But in the end, he also ended up putting up the entire grounds of Camp Douglas, our Civil War prison camp. This is what this area looked like as of about 1863. It started to grow after that, but this became the Civil War prison camp. I've covered that in great detail on some of the others, so I'll just show a little bit around the boundaries of it. Like, over on what is now MLK, just above 35th, there is this Culver's with a really cool bench out in front of it. This Culver's was built over the part of the prison camp where the smallpox victims were buried. It's unlikely that there are any still down there now. They've excavated and built things there over and over and over again, but when they started adding the Culver's, a lot of newspapers had to point out that, yeah, this is also where they buried the smallpox people. Just down the block from the Douglas Monument is the intersection of 35th and Cottage Grove, which used to be a famously haunted spot in Chicago. There was an old house there, supposedly one owned by a woman named Elizabeth McCarthy, which has a couple of ghosts associated with it. One is streetcar operators said that overnight they would drive by the house in the streetcar and see an old woman picking lilacs off of the bushes that were on either side of the house. Then they would see it the next day and not a lilac would be missing. Kids were said to be terrified of this place. Even later than that, there was a story that old Elizabeth McCarthy had died in the place, and her daughters left her room exactly as it had been. She had spent her declining years just staring out the window, watching Cottage Grove Avenue go by. Then her daughters decided to just leave the room as it was, but try to rent out the house, with the condition that people had to leave that one room locked. But people would say they could see the ghost of Elizabeth looking out of the window at them. And just if we turn the other direction, the other side of the monument, you see it there peeking through the trees. This is now part of the Archdiocese, the Catholic Church, but originally this was a place called the Soldiers' Home. This is actually a building from Chicago that goes back to before the Great Chicago Fire, built in the 1860s. It's been expanded on a little bit over the years. But here's how it looked at the time during the Civil War. Now, this was a place founded by Thomas Barber Bryant, who also founded Graceland Cemetery, among many other things in Chicago history. He's one of those Forrest Gump-type characters in Chicago history who just turns up everywhere. But during the Civil War, he bought the handwritten draft of the Emancipation Proclamation and sold these facsimiles of it to raise money for a soldiers' home, a place where soldiers could come on furlough to just relax, hang out, have a good meal. It was not without controversy, as the Chicago Times claimed that it was a hotbed of intolerant abolitionism, the Soldiers' Home, the abolition element at work, intolerance and mock charity. It's like nowadays, every time somebody punches a Nazi, you hear some people going, "Oh, how tolerant." Wilbur F. Story of the Chicago Times pretty much invented that. And speaking of Wilbur F. Story, we're going to go a little bit further down to 43rd Street, about 8 blocks south, to 43rd and Vincennes. Now, there's this empty lot standing right here. Now, we've covered Wilbur F. Story a lot on this. His cemetery has asked me to stop dancing on the guy's grave. Suffice it to say, he deserved it. But towards the end of his life, he lost what marbles he had and started hearing voices in his head that told him to build himself this massive marble palace. And this stood here at 43rd and Vincennes, stretching all the way down to what was then Grand Boulevard, is now Martin Luther King, something Wilbur F. Story would absolutely hate. But it was this massive marble palace. Now, it was never quite finished. At the time of his death, it wasn't entirely completed. It ended up being held up in court for a long time. His will is quite a ride. It's just like written on paper from his desk. It says, "My will" up at the top. Then it's like 2 pages of stuff. The family tried to challenge this in court, particularly because it was probably influenced by the same voices in his head who told him to build this massive house. But Grand Boulevard is the place where you wanted to be in those days. There was a whole investor's guide. Here's a little bit from that saying, on the west front, here is located the most magnificent and costly private enterprise on the boulevard, the palatial marble residence being erected by Mr. W. F. Story, editor and proprietor of the Chicago Times. No time, money, or thought is being spared to make it one of the grandest and most attractive residences on the continent. The spacious grounds are already beautified, and the fine conservatories and lodge are completed. The location was the result of years of travel and observation by Mr. Story in this and foreign lands, and already he is credited with the foresight and judgment which the further grand development of this locality shall vindicate. No, in fact, this was not the result of his great traveling. It was the result of the voices in his head telling him the house he was renting on Prairie Avenue smelled too bad. In his more lucid moments, one time he walked by the place and looked up and said, "What damn fool is putting that place up?" So, eventually it was torn down. Bits of it were used to make about 50 other houses, according to reports at the time. And the first time I went looking for this location, I noticed I was seeing, like, marble ornamentation, marble stoops all around the neighborhood. And of course, today when I tried to find more examples of it, I couldn't find them again. But it's entirely possible bits of this mansion still survive around Bronzeville to this day. But Grand Boulevard, what is now MLK, was known for a long time for its stately mansions. Like this one here, which is now being turned into a library, or they're in the process of it. Or this cool block down here. In fact, in the late 19th century, it was kind of a tradition. The promenade every weekend, there would be all the carriages of the rich people going down Grand Boulevard, making their way to the racetracks down at Washington Park. But there's one block of what was then Grand Boulevard where we can almost trace the entire history of it over the next half century or so, and that is the 4500 block. So we're going to start out on the 4500 block, gorgeous streets. It's still a Grand Boulevard. It was renamed Park Avenue eventually, and then in 1968 MLK. In the 1910s, this had become primarily a Jewish neighborhood, which is when a group moved into this house at 45th, and this is the group better known as the Marx Brothers. They lived here from about 1912 up to 1920, though during World War I, they largely moved out of the area. They bought themselves a chicken farm out in LaGrange because there was a thing going on where farmers were exempt from the draft for World War I. So they got themselves a chicken farm out there. And there's actually an ad in the paper where they decided to get rid of it at the end of the war. Illinois, 5-acre chicken farm in LaGrange, Illinois. Big sacrifice. 4512 Grand Boulevard, Chicago. So if you ever wonder what the Marx Brothers' phone number was when they lived in Chicago, it was Drexel 903. They lived here until about 1920, at which point they decided to move out and out to New York to refine their act. We'll move just a few doors down from there. Was the home of another guy I've talked about on several tours, another couple I've talked about on several tours. This was one of several homes owned at the time, but the one that gets his tribute marker now, of Oscar Stanton DePriest. Now, in the 1910s, when this was still primarily a Jewish neighborhood, Oscar DePriest became the first black alderman in Chicago. And in the process of that, naturally, some people who didn't like that decided to accuse him of graft. So, We'll mention, but it is mentioned here, how the Honorable Oscar DePriest has evolved from an employee of the Pullman Palace Car Company to county commissioner and alderman of the Second Ward, an extensive property holder, has become part of the history of this county and the great city of Chicago. So when he was accused of graft from the gambling houses, he brought in the famous lawyer Clarence Darrow to defend him, the guy from the Scopes Monkey trial, from the Leopold and Loeb trial later on. He managed to clear his name completely, and 10 years later, he became the first black man of the 20th century to become a United States congressman. But the story that comes up quite a bit on the tour, he and his wife are at Graceland Cemetery. After he was elected to Congress, his wife Jessie was invited to tea at the White House with Mrs. Hoover, along with all the other congressional wives. And that should seem like a very small thing. She was invited to tea with everybody else, but this set off a real firestorm of criticism. In fact, the Senator Morris Shepherd said, "I deplore the incident beyond measure. It is recognition of social equality between the white and black races and is fraught with infinite danger to our white civilization." That she had been invited to tea. She was very gracious about the whole thing. She just said, "Oh, the controversy has all just been drummed up since. I had a very lovely time. We just talked about the same thing we'd talk about at church." But Oscar was having none of it. Oscar got a hold of a quote where Senator Shepherd said that if Oscar DePriest tried to use the Senate bathroom, he would block him personally. Oscar said he had no intention of using that bathroom, but now that the senator has said that, he had a mind to go see if he was big enough. He also said that if they weren't going to put aside money to enforce things like anti-slavery laws and voting rights, he wouldn't vote for any money to support the new prohibition laws, which by then were 4 or 5 years old and already widely failing. We'll just move on just a little ways down the block from him. They both have markers in front of their house, but there's another place just down the road, a few doors down, that I noticed the address in an article, but there's no marker here. I feel like there ought to be. But this is a home just down on the corner that was the home of Raymond Willis Nance, pictured here in the Chicago Defender with his violin when he was just a little kid. 12 years later in 1940, he was hired to replace Ben Webster, the trumpet player and violin, in the Duke Ellington Orchestra. Here's a very short clip of that. He became known as Showboat. He was really my favorite member of the Duke Ellington Orchestra. He also did a solo record with a slow version of Take the A Train that's just exquisite. Also a pretty cool jazz version of A Hard Day's Night on the same record. And he'll pop up again occasionally over the course of this very tour. But just a couple of blocks west of here. But here we can kind of trace the evolution. It went from being a Jewish neighborhood when the Marx Brothers lived here, but then around the time of Oscar Stanton DePriest, it was starting to become what was known as the Black Metropolis, as the Great Migration started sending black people from down south up to here. And by the time of Ray Nance, it was becoming a real cultural center, especially for jazz music. But just a few blocks away from them, at 4533, there's this house that's still standing, and this particular person, I believe, has a marker at another location where the house is gone, but this is an apartment that she lived in for a while. This was the home of somebody whose grave we found on Find a Grave Friday, the famous Bessie Coleman, the first black woman to become a pilot. Now, she came to Chicago from down south. There's a terrific picture of her from 1918. She wanted to become a pilot. It was very difficult for women or black people to become a pilot at the time. There were some women pilots. As far as anybody knew, there weren't any black pilots at all. So she came to Chicago and decided she would learn to speak French and go over to France, where there were some schools that would teach her. So, 1918, she was working here in Bronzeville in an area called the Stroll that we'll cover later. This is this fantastic picture of her in the Chicago Defender wearing a mask. Because it was 1918, there was a pandemic on, and she actually made the paper for being one of the first people to decide to wear a mask to work to help prevent the spread of the 1918 pandemic. But a couple of years later, she raised enough money, went to France, had her school all picked out, was all enrolled, but after she got there, she found out that they had just stopped teaching women. A couple of female students had just been killed. It was just bad PR. So she found another school and had to walk, I think she said it was 12 miles every day to get to the school. Now, that was about how far she had walked to school as a kid, too, so it was nothing to her. I wouldn't say nothing. I'm sure it was rough. But over the course of a few years, she became a pilot. came back to Chicago and was living in this apartment here on 4533 South Indiana Street. This is she gave a great interview to the Chicago Defender talking about how she really hoped that she would appeal to other black people to start taking up the life, even though it took a lot of bravery and a lot of courage. The life expectancy for pilots in those days was really not particularly great. Now, there's some film footage of the kind of work that she was doing. The way to make money as a pilot in those days was doing barnstorming and stunts. So here's a brief film of some other people doing the same thing.
It's a new breed abroad in the land. The woman aerial daredevil. Her motto seemed to be, anything a man can do, I can do better. The dauntless little lady is Mabel Cody. Gladys Ingle used shackled ankles and a hook for her hair-raising transfers from plane to plane. Most amazing of all was 10-year-old Mildred Unger, who got right into the spirit of the Roaring Twenties by doing the Charleston 2,000 feet up. A few years earlier, no woman would think of changing attire. Now, Gladys Ingle did it the hard way, carrying a whole wheel aloft. Imagine transferring planes while hanging onto a heavy wheel. Gladys proceeds with the job. You'd expect a Lady Hercules, but despite the grease stains, she still managed to look frail, feminine, and even coy.
Okay, they were ahead of their time. The narrator, not quite so much. Now, there was some film footage made of Bessie herself. This is a thing from 1923. It was noted, Bessie Coleman, aviatrix, has about completed arrangements with D. Ireland Thomas to appear under his personal direction in the theaters in connection with her reels of educational features showing her flight over Berlin. Now, there were some films taken of her flying over Berlin, and eventually she went on a speaking tour trying to promote interest in aviation. Where she would show the film and then do some of those sort of stunts and barnstorming and demonstrate herself flying a plane. There's even a picture of her being filmed here. Now, it says, according to the caption, this is a Pathé service film. There's a lot of Pathé stuff that's been digitized lately. So I couldn't actually find footage of her flying, but I hold out hope that it's still out there someplace. I didn't have time to look as much as I would like to. I thought it would be easy to find. Apparently, if it's still out there, it's buried someplace. But so much newsreel footage is gone, but so much new stuff is turning up all the time. But as I mentioned, the life expectancy for a pilot was not long in those days. And in 1926, she was killed in a crash. A plane that she was not flying herself. There was somebody else was in charge of flying this one, but it had a wreck. She is now buried at Lincoln Cemetery here in Chicago. We found her grave on Find a Grave Friday one time. But now we're going to move about 10 blocks back up north onto 35th Street. 35th Street, this is one of the more famous places in Bronzeville. It is currently a beauty shop. But back in the old days, in the 1920s, the early 1920s, this was a place called the Sunset Cafe. It was a jazz club. Probably best known because Louis Armstrong was playing there. In 1926, the Chicago Defender described him as Louis Armstrong, the iron lip cornet wonder. Now, a lot of people played in this place. Charlie Parker, Cab Calloway got his start here. Now, in the late 1920s became the Grand Terrace. Earlier on today, before we started up, we were listening to the Earl Hines recorded live right inside of this place. Now, on the inside, there is a mural that still survives. For years, this place was an Ace Hardware, and people would come by in tour buses to come see the mural on the wall. A lot of people were freaked out when the Ace Hardware closed, but the beauty shop that has moved in is actually displaying it more prominently.
Ladies and gentlemen, Father Hines and his great band playing for you from the new Grand Terrace on Chicago's great South Side. Get ready now for 30 minutes of Super Jive in the Father Hines style. Yeah.
It's actually more prominent and easy to see now than it was at the time, than it was when it was in Ace Hardware. I especially like the devil guy playing the drums. Now, Earl Hines, Father Hines, is one of several people over the years who is rumored to have sold his soul to the devil for his musical abilities. Some people say that it was the way that he played is there was a third hand on the keyboard, and that would have been the devil. So here's Earl Hines as he appeared in 1947. Now, A particularly interesting thing is that there are stories that Al Capone owned about 25% of this place, and that actually comes from Earl Hines' mouth himself. Now, Al Capone, of course, is said to have been pretty much everywhere in Chicago. It's almost never actually true, but in this case, we've actually got a little bit of Earl himself talking about it in the 1970s, so here's a first-hand account.
Al came in there and one night and called the whole band and show together and said, now, we want to let you know our position. He says, we just want you people to tend to your own business. We'll give you all the protection in the world. He says, we want you to be like the three monkeys. You hear nothing, you see nothing, and you say nothing. And that's what we did. And I used to hear many things, many of the things that they were going to do, but I never did tell anyone. And sometimes the police used to come always looking for a fall guy used to come in and say, Earl, what were they talking about? I said, I don't know. So, well, you were sitting right there. I said, yeah, I sit on the bus too, but I don't pay attention to what people are saying. So I said, no, you're not going to pick me, because they had a habit of putting the pictures of these different people that would bring information in the paper. And the next day you find them out there in the lake somewhere, swimming around there with some chains attached to their feet and all that, you know what I mean?
So, I am always particularly skeptical of any stories about Al Capone in Chicago, but there you have it, first-hand account from Earl Hines himself. Now, we mentioned Louis Armstrong a second ago. Louis Armstrong also, we'll just briefly go over here, had a house at 421 East 44th, where he was living while he played in these places, and also the Lincoln Gardens up on 31st, which is probably where he smoked his first joint, and was seldom sober again for the rest of his life. Here's a picture of how he appeared when what he would have been playing here. Though, of course, to those of us nowadays, he's probably more familiar the way that he looked when he was considerably older than this, like that. And this was just one of a number of different places that were on East 35th Street at the time. There's another one. You can see that beauty store is right in the back right now. Right where the BP is was a place called the Plantation Cafe, which, if you look up things about it online, it shows up in a couple of articles. They always say that it closed in 1927 after it was bombed, supposedly in part of a gang war. Which is possible, but looking things up, it had been closed for a while when there was a fire there. Some said it was a bomb, some said that it was arson. It really didn't make a whole lot of news at the time. It was actually remained open after that. They reopened a few weeks later and were shut down in 1928 for serving illegal liquor. The cops came in and found that they were charging $1.25, which is about $20 in today's money, for bottles of ginger ale. $20 for a bottle of ginger ale. I'd be thinking there like, this had better be the best ginger ale I ever had in my life. You got lucky. But also, it's not really noted very often. We talk about this building a bit, but just over on the other side of the old Grand Terrace / Sunset Cafe is this building that was once the 8th Regiment Armory. Now, this is generally known for being an armory for the 8th, a black unit that was founded back in the 1870s, then reformed for the Spanish-American War. It was also used by the 370th, a segregated group during World War I that went to fight under the French. They had an easier time getting placed there. They were known as the Black Devils, and are now the subject of the Victory Monument by Leonard Cronell, who was a French sculptor who was discovered by Laredo Taft, the guy we know as the Eternal Silence guy from Graceland Cemetery. The Victory Monument just about a block away. You can see the BP in the background there. But the Armory also happened to be a music venue every now and then. Like New Year's Eve one night, Duke Ellington headed the benefit in a dance show. So it had been a couple of years before Ray Nance joined the band. But he was operating there with Ivy Anderson as the singer. This is a picture of the inside of it. This was also a musical venue that still survives today. Now, just about a block up on South Indiana, a little ways over, is the Chicago Defender building. Chicago Defender was one of several black newspapers that were in Chicago today. Not necessarily the most important, but definitely the most famous today. There was also things like the Broad Axe. I get a lot of good information out of the Broad Axe. Now, One thing about the Chicago Defender is they were about the first place to start calling this area Bronzeville. In 1934, about the earliest mentions of it in print relate to when the Chicago Defender held elections for the mayor of Bronzeville. This was first done in 1934. They elected, usually the mayor would be like somebody like a local undertaker. 1935, the second year that they did it, they even showed a picture of Ethel Waters, star of stage and screen television within a couple of years of this. She had a hit at the time with Miss Otis Regrets by Cole Porter. They showed a picture of her swinging by the office to cast a ballot for her vote for the mayor of Bronzeville. Though she was not actually a Bronzeville resident, so this was make up your own joke about election, about electoral fraud, I suppose. But they're probably, one of the ways that they're better remembered, one of the ways that they survive today, is they still have a parade for Bud Billiken. Now, Bud Billiken was, you see up at the top here, Chicago Defender Jr. The young folks section, the kid page, had a columnist named Bud Billiken. A Billiken was like a charm doll. And after this, there started being Bud Billiken clubs all over the place, which are kind of the equivalent of like the Cub Scouts. Now, among the people who started out in Bud Billiken clubs were Ray Nance, whose mother ended up starting her own club, especially when it became written up quite a bit after her son got famous. And others who got their start playing would have been people like Nat King Cole, Lionel Hampton, among Bud Billiken finds. And Nat King Cole himself, for that instance, over on Vincennes, just a few blocks away from this, just 3 blocks north of Wilbur F. Story's old place, was the home of Nat King Cole, which is still standing today. And while we're on the subject of musicians in the area, not too far away at 36th and Prairie was the boyhood home of Quincy Jones, kind of hidden behind the trees there. He got one of his early starts working with Ray Charles. Eventually was, he's this guy. Eventually was arranging things like Sinatra at the Sands, with arranged and conducted by Quincy Jones. Produced the Thriller album. Long pedigree, still alive today. You might remember a few years ago he did that interview where it was like, we shouldn't be talking about this stuff. You want to go see a dead body? It was a fantastic interview. I can't do an impression of him for the life of me. But since we're talking about clubs and music still, though, not much to see right here at the moment. This is just a little bit of 31st Street. But 31st Street, right about in this location, would have been the original site of Jack Johnson's Club de Champion. Now, Jack Johnson, of course, was the first black heavyweight champion boxer. And here in 1912, he opened the Club or Café de Champion, which was $15,000 worth of paintings alone, $60 cuspidors inside of the place. Now, one thing I always like to show off is it's hard to really impress on people just what a big deal boxing was in the United States at the time. There's this terrific picture of the cover of the Chicago Daily Inter-Ocean. Melville Fuller, the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, had died. But he died the same day that Jack Johnson had a fight, so the Jack Johnson fight was a much bigger deal than the death of the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court. And I always love this because Justice Fuller was a jerk. He almost always ruled against civil rights. Back during the Civil War, he would rail against abolitionists all the time. So here you've got Justice Fuller dead. Jack Johnson's like... Though, ironically, there's a Fuller Elementary right in Bronzeville. If we're looking for things to change the names of, that's one of the first ones that I would recommend myself. Now, the Club de Champion didn't last for particularly long. Just a few months after it opened, Johnson's wife committed suicide upstairs. The kind of people who didn't like Johnson started spreading rumors that he had been abusing her. Shortly thereafter, he became involved with one of his waitresses. Her father spread a story that he had her kidnapped and taken down there. Ended up with him in an awful lot of legal trouble. The cafe only lasted for a few months long, though his career lasted quite a while after that. Now, from right here, now this was 1912. This is before the Great Migration started turning this into the Black Metropolis. But thereafter, by the 1930s, this would have been about the north end of what came to be called the Stroll. Starting at 31st Street for about 4 blocks down on South State, there was just one jazz club after another. They used to say you could stand on the corner with a trumpet and the trumpet would play itself. So let's take a look at what the Stroll looks like today. This is going down State Street between 31st and 35th. You'll notice a distinct lack of jazz clubs here. So this is all just Illinois Institute of Technology campus now. And proceeds for some blocks beyond this, but looks about the same. But part of the reason, one of the reasons that is often given for Bronzeville's decline in the late 20th century, a part of his when black people started being able to find jobs and housing in other neighborhoods, a lot of the upper and well-to-do people left. But also, Illinois Institute of Technology tore an awful lot of it down. Like this in particular, this is the Crown Hall designed by Ludwig Mies van der Rohe. This was built right over the spot of a place called the Mecca Hotel, which later became the Mecca Flats, which IIT bought in 1937. The residents petitioned them to keep it from tearing it down for another 15 years after that, though by the early 1950s, it was a notorious slum. People who lived there told stories about the janitors keeping pistols in the closets, but IIT was the place that owned it. And nowadays, they're very open about the fact that they handled this really badly. They'll talk quite a bit about how when they first opened, you can look in their old documents, and they talked about needing a buffer between the school and the black community. But of course, every time they start talking about this, guys from the class of 1960 have to show up and start saying, no, we saved the South Side. Kind of people we would have called moldy figs at one point in history. But that is what covers up a whole large section of the place. There's another place right in the middle of it that I wanted to look up. It is right about where the transportation center is now. On the 3200 block of South Wabash Street, which is just a middle part of the campus now. This, in the 1930s, 40s, and 50s, and into the 60s, was the home, or until it was torn down, was the home of the Chicken Man, one of Chicago's most iconic and incredible street performers. I have had a picture of this guy on my wall the entire 15 plus years that I've lived in the city. It's right behind me right now on the wall, up above the light. Now, the Chicken Man was a street performer who would go around with a chicken on his head. One guy that I used to talk to said, man, that chicken did everything but talk. He would have the chicken dance, he would have the chicken drink, he would have it pretend to make phone calls. He had several different chickens over the years. It wasn't just the first one all the time. In fact, when one of his chickens, a chicken that he called May West Pistol Packin' Mama, died, he had a big public funeral for it and hundreds of people attended. There was even a picture of him that turned up in the photographs of Vivian Meyer that were discovered in a storage locker a few years back. And almost remarkably, there actually is footage of this guy performing. Here's a little bit of it. The chicken up there. His real name was Anderson Punch, though he usually went by Casey Jones. Born in Louisiana, 1870. Came to Chicago in 1910, was still performing on his 100th birthday.
Go to sheep. Lay down like a baby. Go to sheep. We'll lay down though, cause he's about go to sheep. Go to sheep. Go to sheep.
Well, this is him performing up around Maxwell Street.
Let me have a shot. No baby, not so business, Papa. No baby, not so business.
Now, one time he was brought into court and he told the judge, Your Honor, I have had some lean times, but I've never had to eat a chicken. He also appears as a character in a number of books by Daniel Pinkwater. All right. But while we're talking about unusual performers in Chicago, we'll just start at the down at the back end of the stroll here. At just below 35th Street is one of a couple of locations. There was originally about halfway up the stroll on 33rd was a place called the Cabin Inn, also known as the Cozy Cabin, which you see as they're advertising here is the oddest nightclub in town. Here's another place for it, the Cabin Inn when it was at 3520, oddest nightclub in town. The headliner was Val de Grey. What this was a black drag club. In the 1930s, you'd think that would be more shocking than it was, but really people were pretty okay with it. The cops raided it once in a while and told everybody to either put on pants or go to jail. The next night, it would be back in operation as normal. Here's Val de Grey, not quite in costume. And here's something I just noticed today while I was putting the pictures together is... here's Val de Grey on stage at the Cozy Cabin, and it mentions down in the text below that one of the other performers who was working there in the late 1930s was Peaches Browning. If you remember the Shooting Showgirls presentation that I've done a couple of times, Peaches Browning was about 15 years old when she married a guy by the name of Daddy. Now, this was in an era in the 1920s that the Defender, when she died, they talked about her being from the era of beautiful nonsense. So she became kind of a cause. She married this very rich guy when she was about 15 and he was looks about 55. They of course had a very public divorce and she tried to parlay that fame into a stage career in the 1920s. By the late 1930s, she was working here at the Cozy Cabin alongside people like Val de Grey. And also, here's a picture of from one night of it. This is probably the best picture of it that survives. I believe the tallest person here is probably the drag performer who performed under the name Sepia Mae West, Pistol Packin' Mama. Now, during the 1930s, I've seen reports, I haven't seen it verified, but they even had a drag performer imitating Sally Rand's act that was going on the Midway during the 1933 World's Fair. Now, this was regarded as generally a working class place. It was known as a black and tan, which means that both black and white customers went there. There was another similar sort of club called Club de Lisa. I know we got some of the de Lisas out there watching today. De Lisa was generally known as more of an expensive place. This one catered a little bit more to the working people. But in the 1930s, there was a whole craze for what they wouldn't call them drag clubs at the time, but that's what we'd call them now. Now, I'm a little bit over time already, but I want to cover a couple of other things before I close out. We'll just go briefly back up the road a little ways. This is what I had up at the beginning. At 3631 MLK was the home of Ida B. Wells. Now, the namesake of the street, once known as Congress. I don't think too many people would object to renaming something named after Congress. It's not like Congress deserves to have a street named after it. But she grew up down south and got interested in the lynching phenomena. She started to suspect, maybe some of these people who were being lynched by white mobs are not actually guilty. She wrote a pamphlet about this, Southern Horrors, Lynch Law and Its Phases. In all its phases. White mobs responded to that about like you'd probably expect. So she fled to Chicago in 1892, continued to be an advocate for things like that. But an interesting thing is most of the time that they mention her in places like the Chicago Defender, it's for her work promoting art and poetry. That came up quite a lot with her. We will also move on to another house that is still standing and has a sign in front of it. Now, just this morning on the mini tour, we went to see the grave at Graceland Cemetery of Dr. Daniel Hale Williams, whose house is still standing here. What he's probably best remembered for is, for one thing, he was Clarence Darrow's personal physician for a while. But also one day in 1893, a guy by the name of James Cornish came into Providence Hospital, which Dr. Williams ran, having been stabbed in the heart with what newspapers described as a sailor's knife. Now, Dan made the incision, probed, found that it had actually pierced the pericardium. To save him would have required open heart surgery, which nobody had ever done successfully before. Now, I talked about this on Mysteries of the Museum one time, and they wanted me to really play up the drama, like Dr. Dan knew that this was an incredible risk. But really, it wasn't an incredible risk. This guy was dead where he stood. I mean, they could try something, but most likely the guy was dead, and that was that. But Dan was able to do open heart surgery and save the guy's life, and this made the press even at the time. The Chicago Daily Inter-Ocean ran a big article, sewed up his heart. Now, this is one of those things where It's hard to call anybody the first to do anything because there's always somebody else with a claim on it. But as far as anybody knew at the time, nobody else had ever done successful open heart surgery before. And this is an actual picture of James Cornish, the person. It was published in medical magazines sometime later. And one other place, and this one I actually messed up, but I'm going to do it anyway. I should actually have been about another block west here, but it would be about the same view. Mostly an empty space now where that school is. But there was a house on, I'm on Michigan here, it was really on Indiana. This place that was owned by a woman by the name of Minnie Wallace. I love talking about Minnie Wallace. Minnie Wallace was living here in 1897 when she married a guy by the name of Jack Ketchum. Shortly thereafter, Jack Ketchum died of I don't think they ever found a complete cause of death to it, but she inherited quite a bit of money. The family immediately came in and said, no, this had to have been a murder. That probably wasn't even him at the wedding. She probably just had the butler posing. Inside of the house, she had a giant painting of herself. She gave a whole inquest to the police inside of the parlor of the place. The reason this seemed so suspicious was not only that she was much younger than Ketchum and inherited a lot of money, but 12 years before, when she was only about 15, she had married the mayor of Emporia, Kansas, and right after that wedding, he had died of arsenic poisoning. And she was brought to trial for that one. They brought in a lot of people on trial who testified that this guy took arsenic all the time anyway, just because he thought it gave him sexual powers and protected him from STDs, which he was always at risk of spending as much time in brothels as he did. So she was acquitted of the murder. And in this case, they had the inquest. After rumors that it had really been the butler at the wedding, the minister who had officiated said, no, that wasn't him. It was really Mr. Ketchum. They couldn't find anything to charge her with. She was never actually charged for murder, ended up inheriting all the guy's money. I've researched a lot about this woman. I'm still not really clear. I don't really have an opinion to this day whether she was actually guilty or not. It's one of those things where they think she did it, but they just can't prove it. But all right, everybody. I've been trying to clear my throat of the same stuff this entire time. Before I get into the upcoming tour, since we've been talking about jazz so much, I gotta say R.I.P. to Bob Kester of the Jazz Record Mart. If you went into the Jazz Record Mart, you could mention something that you thought was a really old obscure thing, and he'd say, "Oh, I've got the master tapes of that." Passed away yesterday, along with Purvis Staples too. I didn't have time to work Purvis Staples into the tour, but. As I said, this is going to be probably the first of a couple of Bronzeville tours. There's so many stories in this place from so many eras in history. Quick plug for the upcoming stuff. Some of the same people we talked about today will be on the Sunday morning tour, which is Oakwood Cemetery. I've only done this one a couple of times before, so I'm excited to do it again. And next Thursday, we are bringing back a classic antique serial killers in Chicago history. We tend to think of H.H. Holmes as America's first serial killer. He wasn't even really the first one in Chicago. And of course, tomorrow I am heading off on the road. We're going to be doing Find a Grave Friday, the morning mini tour on the Facebook page, in some far-flung locality. Saturday morning, after the 10 a.m. mini tour at 11:30, I will be giving a speech at a dedication of the Naked Triangel of Des Moines statue, which is being moved to a new location. I'm kind of its unofficial historian. So we're going to have a whole weekend full of interesting stuff around here. Always cool stuff coming up on Mysterious Chicago. So, if you need a Mysterious Chicago t-shirt, sweatshirt, hoodie, flask, coffee mug, etc. like these fine Georgia voters, just go to cafepress.com/mysteriouschicago. cafepress.com/mysteriouschicago will supply all of your Mysterious Chicago needs. And with that, everybody, I will just put Father Hines back on, and we will just hang out like we always do. Thanks for joining me, everybody.
Now it can be told.
Thanks, everybody. Hey, Karen. Now, I do know that Bob preferred the Blanton Webster version of the Duke Ellington Orchestra, not the version with Ray Nance in it. But if I'd asked him about Ray Nance, he probably knew him personally. Thanks, Nicole. Thanks, Linda. Thanks, Michelle. Thanks, Amy. Thanks, Lorena. Thanks, Tina, Sandy. Dana, I'm planning to at least pop in on Whiskey and a Cookie tomorrow. That's my plan anyway. I've got an idea for what I'm going to do with it. Because really, I don't have a big schedule in Iowa. I got a 5-minute speech to give, and I'll be there for a couple of days. Alex, I thought I'd play something from something related to this particular tour. Karen, no, I intend to keep doing the virtual tours as long as people keep coming to them. I may not do them at the same frequency. Why is it named Bronzeville? The Chicago Defenders started calling it that. I don't know if they were the ones who started it, but they helped popularize it just because it was where so many black people were living. Black and brown people. Thanks, Chloe.
December 9th, add to it a little of the effervescent swing of Father
Ellen, that would have been awesome.
beside a moonlit stream.
Sarah, I might end up at Glendale Cemetery. As I said, I got a lot of time to fill. We'll probably just do some random tours while I'm out there. I got relatives at Glendale. I know there's people from the Babyface Nelson story there. Thanks, Brandy.
The waterfall is singing, loving arms are clinging beside a moonlit stream.
Gina, yeah, Adam at mysteriouschicago.com is the email address to use for me. And if you need stuff to say private, just say so in the message. I keep stuff private for people quite a bit.
Forever, darling, the rhythm and sweetly, that you are mine completely.
Well, Karen, by all means, take the kid to get her shot. Victoria, in-person tours will begin hopefully in the next couple of weeks. I'm really just waiting for paperwork to go through with the city. If it doesn't very soon, I'm going to start talking like with people who already have a business license to like subcontract through them or something. Or I might try like a pay-as-you-want in-person tour, see if that works out. See, as more people start going out and stuff, it's harder to keep people in at the same numbers for virtual tours. Any idea who the clarinet player is? I think it's listed someplace. Offhand, I don't recall. Leslie, hope you enjoyed the replay. Marita, that sounds good. Phyllis, Whiskey and a Cookie is on the Patty Vasquez Show Facebook page. And that's at 6:30 Chicago time on Fridays.
And now comes up number 8 on our program of dancing, a tune titled, melodically, A Little Kiss at Twilight.
And that's the show in which Patty and friends, including myself, drink whiskey, eat cookies, and discuss the events of the week. Let me put the upcoming thing again. Patty Vasquez Show Facebook page. And make prank phone calls to politicians that I think deserve it. Now, there are lots of women out there who are into arsenic poisoning. Many of them come up on antique serial killers. Now, Dean, I'm not driving overnight. I go to bed early most nights. Slide that up over there. Yeah, my schedule is very open for the next couple of days other than the speech at 11:30 Saturday. But I'm intending to be on Whiskey and a Cookie. I haven't missed one yet. Thanks, Jason. Carol, I tanked up with gas this morning. And I got an 8-gallon tank, otherwise it would get me all the way to Des Moines. Actually, probably still will. If I'm willing to keep driving a little ways after it starts beeping. But I'm not going to risk that. Whiskey Acres, I look it up. I'm actually going to a distillery tomorrow in Des Moines. My brother's friend ordered a bottle and they don't ship, so I'm going to go pick it up for him. Jenny, there don't appear to be gas shortages here. Every place that I've been driven by, I went by one gas station that was totally crowded, but the place across the street from it was deserted. So I just went to the one across the street. It was fine. I know I'm hearing horror stories out of Georgia. The pie situation in Des Moines? I'm not sure. I mean, you got your Village Square, your Baker Village Inn, or you did. I haven't lived there in a really long time. Marie, I can't remember the name, but it's someplace in Valley Junction. Let me text my brother about that. Okay. The distillery. All right. Is Groveland Park considered part of Bronzeville? Mike, it depends on who you ask. Audrey and Keeley, I paid about $3.35 today.
Great tune, all done up in a little bit of effervescent jive. Bouncing along with the old favorite, Catherine Perry, to sing a Tiska-da-Taska.
Brown and yellow basket. I wrote a letter to my mommy. On the way I dropped it. I dropped it. Yes, on the way I dropped it. A little boy picked it up, put it in his pocket.
$2.50. We haven't had $2.50 in Chicago in a while, but you know, it's different taxes. If you're driving down Cicero towards Midway Airport, you notice that the gas price changes like 20 cents between getting off of 55 and getting to the airport. 20 or 30 cents. I'm digging these new tunes too. Maybe I won't get a copyright claim on these ones. I don't on Facebook, but YouTube I always do.
I lost my yellow basket, and if he doesn't bring it back, don't know what I'll do. Oh, gee, I wonder where that basket can be. Oh, gee, I wish that little boy I could see.
Chris, then I hear you. This isn't a bad version. But I never liked the song that much anyway, even Ella's version. At least when it's Ella's version, it's Ella. Thanks, Tom.
I lost my yellow basket. Won't someone help me find my basket and make me happy again? No, 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 no. No, 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 no. No, 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 no. Just a little yellow basket. I need a yellow basket.
All right, looks like Zella's working tonight. That's good.
Little yellow basket. A lot of swell rhythm out of the little basket. But here's rhythm and jive. Earl Father Hines and the St. Louis Blues.
Patty, that'd be New Jersey, I believe. Pam, I thought I'd give Betty a bit of a rest because I thought we'd do it. This is from the Grand Terrace Cafe, which appeared on the tour tonight. Amy, I had Miles in a basket yesterday. He got into a laundry basket and I carried him around for a while. Where is that little guy? Miles. Here we go. See, this is an airplane ride that he won't fall out of now that he's too big. A tisket, a tasket, it's Miles in the basket. Joanne, that's alright, it'll still be up. Now he's giving us all the stink eye. Okay, Miles. I'll get you back in the basket. There you go. Let's see if you pop out. Lee, am I on that podcast about Tilly Klimek? I know I've done a few podcasts about her. I can't keep track of which ones sometimes. Amy, we got people. Cindy, my Zelle is adam@mysteriouschicago.com. It's been a trick the first time I tried Zelle for this, since I can't do PayPal right now. First time I tried Zelle, it ended up flagging half of them as possible fraud. Which I guess is supposed to protect me, but I'm not that picky about who sends me money, you know? Hot air balloon ride, that's right, Bob. Miles, where'd you go? Oh, here you are. I didn't see you get out of there, buddy, but here you are.
Time for you epicures. You swing epicures who like your music really jived in top style. Earl Father Hines, this great orchestra, have been playing for you from the new Grand Terrace on Chicago's great South Side.
This announcer sure likes the word jive.
Chicago, this is the National Broadcast.
Randall, I've thought about it. I haven't gotten it done yet. Hyde Park, too. The neighborhood ones have been doing pretty well, so They're all on the list at this point. The Gold Coast one did really well. Prairie Avenue did well, despite being the day that PayPal and Venmo kicked me off. All right, let's rewind this this extremely jive recording. This one too is if you look up Grand Terrace on Archive. There's like 3 minutes of it's a podcast. There's like 3 minutes of people talking before they get to the show. Elizabeth, thanks for joining the Patreon.
What could this be? Ah, it's a Limehouse Blues.
Miles has definitely gotten bigger over the course of the year. He can no longer ride around in Trader Joe's bags, even if they're double bagged, which they always were. Ah, Lily. I think there's a couple of cats named Lily out there tonight. Purr. It possibly is pandemic weight gain. He's had people around all day to give him treats. Carol, the Greyhound station's a little bit a ways north of Bronzeville. It's southwest loop area. Cindy, Adam at mysteriouschicago.com. There's also, if you go to mysteriouschicago.com/donate, it'll give all of the data. There's a neighborhood cat here that looks like Miles too. He's just got a little white tip on his tail. So I always have to check the tail when I see the thing to make sure Miles didn't get out somehow. There was also about 2 a.m. there were some cats outside doing it the other night. Very loudly. And they woke me up, and both the cats were freaking out in the bedroom. Like, where are these guys? Have they no shame? Pam, I was having a sherry cask bourbon and hot water. Having trouble with my throat all night, though. I kept needing to clear my throat the entire night. It was one of those nights where a couple of coughs just wasn't doing it. Greetings, Layman. We're in our post-tour hangout right now, if you're just joining us. The tour was at 8 p.m. Central. But as soon as it's done broadcasting, it'll be up on the Facebook in the video section. Miles. Want to get back up? All right. Mm-hmm. I'll see you tomorrow, Susan. Ow. You need your nails trimmed, don't you? I already got shaved today, Miles. Are your cats good eaters? Kinda. They're picky. News about the Graceland book? A little bit. They're starting to work on the marketing side of things now, so at least I'm hearing from them. So wheels are in motion for it, at least. It's not just sitting in the doldrums, getting delayed and delayed. Thanks, Andy.
Give our faithful seat a slap and carry on in jive. Hi-ho, Silver!
Now, Charlotte, the other cat, has just recently started to get picky. Miles will really only eat canned food if it's fish flavored. He doesn't like chicken, doesn't like beef, no turkey. Charlotte used to eat anything we put in front of her, but now she's a little bit hesitant on the canned food. She just wants treats now. Will I do a book for Rose Hill? I'm not sure if they'd be quite as amenable to it. When people write into Rose Hill and say that I'm being an anti-white racist, they take it a little more seriously than Graceland does. And Tom, I thought of that myself. I mean, all these places that were supposedly built out of Wilbur F. Story's house, it would have been. It's not a good building material, marble. Doesn't do well in Chicago winters. Will I do a book signing? I'm sure I probably will. Kristen, no, I didn't know that myself. And I believe the Chicken Man is at Burr Oak Cemetery, but I doubt he has a headstone. So I'd love to do a Find the Chicken Man's grave for Find a Grave Friday, but I think it would probably be an impossible one.
Melody of the Colorado sunset.
Well, he died without a lot of family, and often when people die without a lot of money or a lot of family, it tends to be unlikely we'll find a gravestone for him. I also don't know whether he would have been buried under Casey Jones or Anderson Punch. No, we can maybe check with Burr Oak. I think it was Burr Oak. I looked him up a minute ago while I was doing the tour. Let me double check again. Go over to Family Search. I think I had to look under Casey Jones to find his death record. And he died at like the age of 104. Records indicate that his real name was Anderson Punch, though a friend of mine who used to see him back in the 50s said the rumor at the time was he claimed that his real name was Humphrey Popcorn. Yeah, Burr Oak. Was living in 47th and Vincennes in a nursing home. And the death record says Casey Jones. Lucy, and now and then I go to Mount Carmel. It comes up a lot on a couple of the tours. I've never done a full tour of it. If I find a grave tomorrow, I'll be further out west than that. But one of many, many people that we ought to have a headstone for presently does not. Now, Gene, I end up at Mount Olivet occasionally. But again, it's a long commute for me. But we've done a few finder graves there. Thanks, Kathleen. Now, this glass is empty. I'm just kind of using it as a prop now. And a cold Mount Carmel, definitely. There's another one. It's a quite a trip to get out there. But sometimes I do it anyway. Especially the Catholic cemeteries are really good for Find a Grave Friday because they've got a search function. So the graves can all be found there. If there was one of those at Burr Oak, we could find the Chicken Man like that. Well, yeah, the glass is empty, but there's only one way to solve that. Thanks, Cindy. Faith Popcorn, that's a good name. There's also Faith Bacon, the burlesque dancer. We should have people whose first name's Faith with the last name of all the unhealthy food. Thanks, Diane. Now, Gary, I used to feel like driving on 88 especially, you could drive about as fast as you wanted to because there were no possible place where a cop could hide. Look at that's cool. That's unusual, too. Faith Potato Chips, like it. Faith Twinkies, that sounds like a great burlesque name. Megan, by all means, get some sleep. Have a good night. Marie, they've had things like... I used to drive past a sign all the time that said speed checked by aircraft. But you could look up and not notice any aircraft there. Thanks, Cindy. I always thought with the speed check by aircraft sign, I always thought that they just kind of put that there to keep you from speeding. It's expected the sign to do most of the work. Donna, you got it. Now, Carol, I don't intend to broadcast while driving, except within the bounds of a cemetery. Thanks, Nicole. I love these curtains. Over the winter, I kind of redid the living room and parts of the... most of the dining room and part of the living room. We kind of went nuts on Society 6 by and mid-century patterns. Thanks, Gladys. Yeah, the Iowa stuff will probably all be on Facebook, because it'll all be broadcast mobile. Well, Lori will probably pass through Dixon before they open. Karen, yeah, gas is definitely cheaper in Iowa. Keely, if she has any questions, let me know. But I might just complicate things. Thanks, Nicole. And this is the side. I'll show Hipster Bert there a little in the background. Probably tuck this down back over here. There we go. State mandated minimum. Well, let's get over the minimum a little while we're all hanging out. This is Hipster Bert.
Did you talk about Duke Ellington, but not mention Jimmy Blanton?
I did mention Jimmy Blanton a little bit.
He redefined the bass, you know.
Yes, I did know.
Earl Hines redefined the piano.
I knew that too, Hipster Bert.
Down the cruise now, we rather imagine you'll hear that famous 7 brands of Earl Hines in
Don't mind hipster Bert, he thinks he knows everything about jazz. But he only knows what I've got in the records collection here. David, yeah, it's, I keep saying that Bronzeville is going to be the next big gentrification thing, unfortunately. Well, it's a double-edged sword in any case. There's a difference between revitalization and gentrification. But when I was driving for Lyft, everybody I brought there was an artist. And they would kind of jokes like, yeah, we're not exactly the gentry, but we're always kind of the first line of attack. Ask 6 word about Billy Strayhorn. Oh, well, okay. So what about Billy Strayhorn?
The Masterpieces by Ellington album is probably Duke's best record, but it really should be called Masterpieces by Strayhorn, who did all of the arranging. It was his charts.
Miles, you want to get in the box? Here's Miles again. He loves to jump in and out of this box. It's just tall enough that it's a challenge.
Now here's a great tune all done up in a little bit of effervescent jive. Bouncing along with the old favorite Catherine Perry to sing A Tisket a Tasket.
And folks, yeah, if you're not hip to Masterpieces by Ellington, it is the best Duke Ellington album, which means it's probably among the best albums, period. It was re-released a couple of years ago with a new audiophile remastering. I'm not normally the type who would notice that kind of thing, but this sounds incredible. This is one of very few albums that I could probably sing note for note. I'm going to leave it out. I want to listen to it later. Miles. Miles has been especially playful and cuddly the last few days. Right now he's playing in his tunnel. Broadcast equipment? I don't have a lot of broadcast equipment in here. I'm just using my laptop. That'll go with me. Marie highly recommended. It's now, more commonly you see it with this cover. That's how they published it for most of the 20th century. Pamela, we're not all gone. We got people for the cats. And that was one record where I sprung for the audiophile pressings. I love the record so much. But yeah, for the weekend, though, I think it's probably time to go ahead and start plugging the upcoming stuff again. So, for the weekend, just watch your alerts. We're definitely broadcasting at 11:30. We'll have the regular mini tour tomorrow and on Saturday at 10. Then 11:30 on Saturday will be I'll be giving my first public talk in over a year at the unveiling of a statue. Then, also just random times when I come across something interesting while I'm out traveling, I'll be broadcasting from there. I'm talking to a friend about going on Whiskey and a Cookie. I think she would enjoy it. She and her husband, they're both cool. So, anyway, lots of cool stuff coming up. Sunday morning, I'll stick around in Iowa long enough to do the Oakwood Cemetery tour. Then, a week from today, on Thursday, we'll be back here with antique serial killers from Chicago history. So, as always, there's lots of cool stuff. In fact, this weekend, there's more cool stuff than ever coming up right here on Mysterious Chicago Tours. So, until tomorrow, I'm Adam Seltzer from Mysterious Chicago Tours. I'll see you from somewhere in the vicinity of the Quad Cities tomorrow. And until then, stay safe, stay strong, and of course, stay spooky.